Hi everybody, it's your old pal Todd, Dammit. Today brought to you by my good friends at Sully Guitars. My very good friend John Sullivan, an amazing guitar maker, a luthier perhaps, makes amazing instruments that I love and I can't get enough of. I got a couple. I'd like to get more. Today, a very special guest, a man I have made a connection along the way during this crazy KISS journey of my life. He is the son of Paul Stanley, the eldest son of Paul Stanley, and is just embarking on his own music career, which is really, really exciting. We talk a great deal about a lot of things, not just about KISS, mostly about him and his career and his music and his writing. And he's a very, very astute, talented young man, and I can't wait to just watch his whole career explode. Ladies and gentlemen, Evan Stanley. I'm recording. It's a good thing we got all that stuff out of the way, honestly.
Yeah, all the interesting stuff's out of the way. Now let's get
yeah, exactly. Now it's just like, so you garden? You got a green thumb at all?
Who is it? Is it Billy Squire that gardens?
Really? Wow.
I'm pretty sure he's like really, but like not like a little. He's like passionate about gardening, and I think he has like a plot in Central Park he takes care of. Like I'm pretty sure he's like very legit into that.
Wow, it's so cool that you bring up the name Billy Squire because he's one of those people that I think is one of the most underrated songwriter musicians on the planet. I mean, like if you get the Billy Squire greatest hits, it's gold. Like it's all good. You know, it's like rock, but all the pop isms within that kind of thing. He was just so damn good at that, you know?
It's so weird to see. I mean, especially for me growing up, because like a lot of what I listened to, it was a really weird mix of like all the stuff that was playing when I was a kid. Like I really grew up on like Blink-182 and Green Day and that stuff.
Right.
And then, you know, like my parents' shit and like kind of that as a jumping off point. It's really weird to see, like sometimes my parents will mention someone who was huge back then, or I'll look on, you know, like I was coming up right when Wikipedia started to be like a pretty useful thing. So like I could see where things charted and, you know, like the certifications and like you look at guys like I love Dan Fogelberg.
Yeah.
Like, nobody knows who Dan Fogelberg is, but then you look at his discography and like, dude had like a ton of multi-platinum albums in a row, bunch of hits. And it's like, it's really weird. Like I don't know exactly what it is that makes him kind of get swept to the side. And then someone else who was, I don't know, who would you say is in like the same category that people still remember? And like, you look at the metrics and it's like, huh.
Yeah.
That's always been, I haven't quite figured that out. I mean, just a weird thing to see what kind of, who gets favored by history.
I'm quite envious of your position because when I was young, even finding the Beatles or Led Zeppelin or The Who, these bands had all, well, The Who was still together, but Keith Moon was dead. You know what I mean? Like it was like that chapter. Led Zeppelin was done, the Beatles were done, you know. So to find those bands was like, you know, like you're Indiana Jones, you know, you're kind of like, have you heard this? And your friends are passing records back and forth. And it was this amazing, you know, just these finds that you would find. And like, and now to look at it and look at everything, this giant pool of music to just go and I suppose because of the immediacy of just going on my phone and calling up P-Funk, whatever you decide you want to look for, and you can have an immediate sort of dive into everything, which I think somewhat takes away the adventure of it, but it really does sort of speak to a guy like you, because what I think is what's so interesting about you is, and it's what I wanted to initially start with, was that sort of like, how does a guy like you find music when it's just there, it's omnipresent, you know what I mean? Like guys like me who grew up in like, you know, it's like I grew up in a town without a record store, it was a whole thing, so we had to seek it out. So but for you, you know, when it's music is the household business in a sense, it's like, how do you actually stumble upon where you go like, this is something I'd like to actually pursue?
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. So for me, because I'm so lucky in a lot of ways. Like I feel like I was born like literally like within a year. Like I talk to my friends who are like literally like a year or 2 years younger and they didn't have quite the same experience, where I was born where like I had a computer when I was a kid, but it wasn't connected. I mean, because my parents didn't want me on the internet when I was like 5, but like
right, yeah.
Also even if I was, like, there wasn't that much there. Like,
Right.
not to find, not like in terms of music or anything. So I had the experience of growing up with CDs and even cassettes for like
Sure.
the first like 5 to 8 years or so. So
Sure.
like that was cool. Like I remember going to Tower Records and seeing, the end caps and seeing like all the big posters and stuff. So that was I'm happy I got that experience. And then even even as like a teenager, like I had iTunes and I had all that, but like I still had to buy music and that was very different. So for me it was much more I could discover stuff, but to listen, like I didn't have Spotify till I was like 17 maybe.
Sure.
So like which was great, but like there are a lot of years before that that are important. I didn't have Spotify, there was no Apple Music. So like
Hmm.
it came down to a money thing too, where like I couldn't
Yeah.
afford to listen to all the music I wanted to. And like that's something that's so weird now. I was talking to a buddy of mine at the studio and like now, we want a reference. We just like and it's
Yeah.
there. Like we
Of
listen to
course. Yeah.
everything. You can listen to the whole record. You can listen to everything they've ever put out, every bootleg. So for me, like a lot of it was YouTube. Like I listened to a ton of live stuff on YouTube.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So that was big, like a ton of live stuff. But I remember like I worked at a deli by my house and we got our paycheck every 2 weeks and I'd drive down the hill and I'd stop at the magazine stand on Beverly Glen and Ventura because they had all like the import magazines. They had all the really cool like
The best
UK
ones.
music magazines.
Yeah.
So I'd get those and then I'd go to Freak Beat Records on Ventura, like between Woodman and the other street.
Yeah.
But what was great is at that point they had a ton of CDs too. So like I love vinyl, but CDs were way cheaper and they had
Of
used CDs.
course.
So I could get used CDs for like $2 or $3. So instead of paying $10 on iTunes, I could get like 3 or 4 CDs for the price of one. So I would do that and I'd go home and I'd just put them in on at that point computers had disk drives. So I'd put them in and I have them on my iTunes and that was cool because I got so much music through talking to the guys there, seeing
Right.
people come in. Like I had a few friends who would shop there, so like you just see people picking shit up, and you're like, "That looks cool. What is that?" And I found a lot of bands like that, um, and that's what I love about vinyl too. Is like I found a lot of bands just because I thought the covers were cool. You
That's
know?
how we all did it, dude. Is like Molly Hatchet and bands like that got a lot of, got a lot of love from kids like us who were going like, who are these guys? It never sounded like what the album cover looked like, but
Yeah.
that's part of the fun. So, yeah.
Oh, totally. Like that's one thing I think is I guess it's not really a bummer. It's just changed a lot. We're like, now it's like I'll discover music because I'm on Instagram or something, and I'm on, the Discover, and someone or something pops up. I'm like, what is that? Like that looks cool. I don't get it. I want to know what it is. So I click and I click, and eventually you end up on their Spotify, and like you're like, oh, this could be cool. So
Yeah.
like I guess like you still do it visually in a lot of ways, but it's not that like, oh,
Well, it's a trip too because you bring up an interesting point. Because when I was a kid, and living in a small town and all that, before much MTV and that sort of experience, and way before YouTube, a lot of our experience with music was just straight audio. You know what I mean? And it was
yeah,
straight two-dimensional photos on covers of albums. Like your father's band was like one of those bands where it was like, luckily the images themselves were so engrossing that,
yeah,
it grasped all of us. But, it just, the idea that then once in a while some clip would come on, whether it was American Bandstand or whatever the hell, one of those Don Kirshner rock concerts. And they would be so engrossing because, but now a guy like yourself goes and plays a showcase at the Viper Room, and, literally you'll walk off stage and go on YouTube and that show will be, you know,
oh yeah.
warts and all. And I go through it too. So none of that really bothers me because you kind of have to accept the changes as they go along. It just is what it is. But it is interesting to imagine that every band you find now, you can go on YouTube or on the internet and find every show they've ever played, everything that they've ever done. Whereas back in the day, the mystery of it all, whether it was just buying a record because you thought it looked cool,
Yeah.
that's kind of wackily gone.
Yeah, and it's a weird thing. I was talking to my dad about this a few days ago, and it's such a weird shift where, I remember him saying, he's like, you get one chance to make a first impression. I was
Sure.
like, that's actually not true anymore, which is a weird thing. Like, of course, if you're playing the Super Bowl or it's your first time on Fallon or whatever it is, like
Sure.
SNL, like yeah, like that's definitely true. Like you get one time to make a first impression on that scale,
Hmm.
but it's not the same way that it was. And even those things don't mean the same thing that they did because I mean, I would assume I wasn't around for it, but back when it's like if you made it on a TV show, like that's how people saw you if
Of
they weren't at
course.
a show. If they
Hmm.
weren't at a concert, like that's how they saw you. Now it's like you can go on Instagram, you can go on TikTok, you can go on YouTube, you can go on like people can see you everywhere. So like there isn't that same thing. Now it's just about doing all the time. And I think it's interesting too, like as a guitar player, I think it's interesting where I learned so much stuff where by literally getting software kind of like a record on my computer called like I think it was called like the Great Slow Downer, and it was like
Right.
you
Yeah.
just slowed stuff down, and you would like like you would do that, and like because I had YouTube, but there weren't guitar tutorials the way there are now. Where like now I have like friends, little siblings, where it's like, oh, I learned this. I'm like, how? They're like, look at this video, and like they walk you through everything,
I
like
know, it's
and like
nuts.
so well. But I didn't have that. Like, if you could find one decent like how-to video, you were like, oh my God. But like,
Yeah.
I think the thing that's one thing that's cool about that is it's definitely shifted. I think whether it's um, guitar-wise or like as an artist, like writing, everything else, it's shifted away from like what you can do to what you choose to do. Because now everyone, if you have like a little bit of time and you're willing to really fucking work, like you can learn how to do anything. Like it's there, the information's there. Like of course, like there's gonna be some people who are just better at it than others naturally. I think like I definitely think everyone is inclined towards certain things. Like I'm never going to be an amazing basketball player. I could work my ass off. I'm just like I'm not very good. I could
Right.
probably get like okay, but I'm never going to be great. But
Sure. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I started playing guitar, I was like shit, like I could be great at this. Like I'm going to have to work a lot, but I know I have this. And like I think once you find your thing and latch on to it, like you just got to put in the work. And now all the tools are there and they're free for anyone to put in that work. So like if you want to learn some crazy obscure technique or you want to dissect some, ancient recording that like six people have heard, like it's there. You can do it.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So now it's so much more about what you choose to do, which I think in a way is kind of cool because it's all about taste now.
It
Like
is.
everything is about taste. Which, to be fair, like I think that's what's always separated good and very good from great. But
Right.
now it's like now that's kind of the prerequisite. Like you don't even have to sing to be a singer. Like, but you have to have a cool tone. You have to choose, you know, how to approach a song. Where like before it was like you had to have great pitch. And that was like if
Sure.
you didn't have great pitch, it wouldn't work. Now it's like you can have like all right pitch. Like you still have to have some pitch, but like you can have like all right pitch, but a lot of emotion. And like if you can get that across, like then yeah, sure. Like and
I
it's weird, but it's
I suppose the argument would be there that the Iggy Pops and the Joe Strummers and the so many examples of guys who it was Bob Dylan, the list goes on. Neil Young.
yeah,
I mean, well, Neil Young's a great singer, really, but I mean more like not what you would call he wasn't Freddie Mercury. I mean he
yeah.
wasn't. And I think I've always been a big believer that as long as there's passion involved, and especially when it comes to lyrics and conveying that kind of stuff, then it isn't so much about pitch. But I think it's an interesting thing to bring up because coming from the generation that I come from and the kind of taste in music that I have is a lot more sort of, I like the raw and the
Yeah.
time is giving and going and the Robert Plant's voice cracks a bit in this one line. That's so
Yeah.
awesome to me, which is missing in many factions of what we would consider more pop music now. But it does exist in the more indie world to some degree. But even the indie world has become even more and more slick too.
But I
So
think
yeah, go ahead. I
that's
would love to.
part of it. That's the interesting thing because I was even, I was trying to figure out sometimes it's like, why do I connect with this? Because I love a lot of the same stuff as you, I know.
Mhm.
And I also love a lot of like new, real like pop stuff. And
Yeah,
like I was listening, I think, and again, it comes down to taste of like, it's hard to know when to fix things and when to not. Like, because you shouldn't
it
fix
is.
everything. And
No.
like, I think that again, like that sometimes separates. There was a 5 Seconds of Summer song a while back, and like Charlie Puth wrote it, and what's it called? It's the one that sounds exactly like Charlie Puth. Everyone was like, "It's a Charlie Puth song." It's like, yeah, but and it's awesome. Like, it's great. And I listened to it like crazy for like a day. And then I never went back to it. And I was like, why is that? And it was like,
Hmm.
because, and I don't mean this in a bad way, like I actually really like a lot of 5 Seconds of Summer stuff. I think they write great songs. But
Hmm.
this one in particular, I think they went too far with fixing. Like
Interesting.
everything in it, even like whether it was melodically, lyrically, performance, production, it was perfect. But to a point that it was like nutritionally void. Like, you know what I mean? Like it was like this is really enjoyable. I didn't get shit from it, but it's really enjoyable. But then you listen to like Post Malone, and I know for a fact like Louis Bell doesn't quantize a lot of stuff. Like if you listen closely, like he'll fix stuff that's like really rank, but he's not sitting there quantizing keys or anything like that. He just plays it in, and if he likes the performance, that's it. Where it's like, I think it's again the taste thing. It's just knowing when to fix and when to leave.
And that's what you say. It's the great mystery of like, if something's magical, like, oh, he kind of blows that line. It's like that, like looking back at that female vocal on "Gimme Shelter,"
Oh
the
yeah.
rolling when she cracks. I know from what I've read that she was like, I've got to do that again. They were like, absolutely not. That was like
Hmm.
just so magical. You know what I mean? And I think that, and I go back and listen to a lot of records, and Stones are a great example because there's all kinds of times where you go, wow, that they probably should have taken another stab at tuning the bass there, but it's gonna, or intonating it or whatever. But would that have made it better? I mean, no, probably not.
No.
But by today's standards, it would most certainly be corrected. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Well, I think also the interesting thing, and this is something I found, just on a more technical level, is like you look back at these old records, and I love the Who. I love
Me too.
they're amazing, and like, dude, Daltrey sings out of tune a lot. Like,
Yeah,
no, but like, and I don't mean it in a bad way. It's just because you don't even notice. Like his
sure.
voice, it works for, and
Hmm.
then the bass is a little out, the guitar is a little here, the second guitar is a little here. So everything kind of has this nice chorus. And
Totally.
but
Yeah,
if you really listen, you're like, that's not in, but it's okay, it works. And like, I mean, he's an amazing, amazing singer.
he is. Yeah,
But now it's a weird thing where I even notice it with guitar too. If you're working with tracks that are really program heavy or synth heavy, like MIDI
sure.
heavy, everything's perfectly in tune. And if you're a little out of tune, it sounds horrible.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah,
Where before, everything being a little out of tune sounded amazing because it just
yeah.
makes it wide and big and deep. So now it's like I go through and I detune synths a teeny, teeny bit. And like,
Interesting.
not always, like, again, it's like you got to know when it's right. But like, there are definitely times like you detune the synth. Like, I'm talking the slightest bit. But if
Right.
you do it on everything, throw chorus. I like chorus on bass now. I love, like, I've been putting light chorus on 808s, and it's the sickest thing. Like,
That'd be cool. Yeah.
but just like, yeah, it's a weird thing where you realize like perfect is perfect, but it's not necessarily good.
No,
Like,
that's true. I think like you said, the nutritional value, it becomes antiseptic. There's like, it's just so, I don't know, like it just goes right through you. Like you say, it's gonna be delicious. Wow, I
mhm.
love this, and then you just never go back to it. I wanted to bring up really quickly. So, at what point does a guy like you, because I'm always fascinated by the idea of like, I never, my parents were musical, but they weren't,
Yeah.
gigging musicians. So you see guitars all day long. My kids see guitars all day long. And
Yeah.
then one day you decide, I'm going to pick that one up. Like what starts that process?
Yeah, it's funny for me. Like everyone assumes, like, oh, you must have been playing since you were like a baby. It's like,
Of
nah,
course
like,
not. Of course not. It'd
no,
be like
I,
if your
I
dad's an accountant, you're not just immediately like good with numbers, or whatever.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, exactly. It's like for me, it was always like it was really cool, but it was just dad's job, and like
Of course, yeah.
I really connected with certain bands and certain music, so like that connection was always there. And when I was really young, I asked my parents to like teach me or get me a piano teacher. I don't remember. I was like 3. I was like, I want to play piano, and they didn't play, so they found me a teacher. And like I was horrible. I was never practiced, terrible, because I couldn't play the stuff I wanted to.
That's
But
always
when
the
I
thing.
knew I wanted to play something, and like being 3, I was just like, cool, like I can. But that didn't work, and it was kind of like, and that kind of turned me off for a while, just because it was like it was frustrating where you have this whole world of music that you love and like really amps you up, and then you're over here trying to play In the Hall of the Mountain King, and it's just like
Yeah.
not my vibe.
No.
Not then, at least. And
No.
then I was over at my buddy Justin's house when I was like 10 or 11, and he's like, "Come here, I got to show you something." And he played "Smells Like Teen Spirit" on his
Oh, sure.
acoustic. And I didn't like Nirvana then. Like, I didn't even really know Nirvana, but I knew the song. And it was like, holy shit! Like, I knew that song, and just the fact that I knew the song and he could play a song I knew, it didn't matter what it was. He could have played anything. But the fact that I knew it and he could play it was like magic. It was like he was a god. All of a sudden, like he took this song that we heard on the radio and on our iPods and in TV, and then he just played it. And he could do it over and over. And I was like, I have to do that. So I went home and I was like, Dad, you have to show me guitar. I think I had asked him a couple times before, and he like showed me a couple chords, and I was like, this is stupid. I want to play with my Legos or whatever, and like
Yeah.
forgot them really quick. But this time I was like, I have to do this. It wasn't like, yeah, that'd be cool. Like it was as soon as I saw him play, I was like, I have to know how to do this. And he showed me an A, a D, and an E for this song. Is it Down in the Valley or in? It's this
Okay.
old folk song. Like
Okay.
it popped up on YouTube the other day. I guess it's like a lot of people learn it on guitar, and it was the first thing he learned on guitar. So he showed it to me. And the next morning, I woke him up early before school. I was like, I remember. Show me another chord. And he was like, oh, I guess you are gonna play. And then just every day, like I'd come home from school, and I only knew at that point, I guess by the end of the second day, I knew 4 chords maybe. And I would
Right.
just play them from like, 3 or 4 o'clock until I went to sleep. And then I'd get up early before school and I'd play. And he was like, okay, like if you're really going to do this, like I'll get you an acoustic. And he's like, you'll probably need like a teacher. He's like, I can show you a lot, but like, you should learn like the basics from someone who's going to make sure you know like all the little things and not
Sure.
mix stuff. So he through my piano teacher, who at that point my piano teacher was awesome. He was like, "Yeah, like you should just play guitar, dude." And he's like, "My buddy Doug's a good teacher," and Doug was like the chillest. That dude was like, because I think a teacher can make all the difference,
Yeah.
like he was just like the most encouraging. Like any little tangent I wanted to go on, like he was like really good at. I was so fired up and so psyched on guitar, and he was really good at like grabbing that and just turning that into forward momentum, and like that. And I saw him maybe like once a week or something, but like I was playing for at least 8 or 9 hours a day.
Yeah.
And he was just really good at like, he'd be like, like just go down this road, and then he would leave, and then I would just do that all week long. And so it was really good at like, he was really good at kind of showing me how to teach myself stuff. I think that's what I'm getting at. It's like, that was the most helpful, is like, he made the process of discovering shit really fun for me. So
Cool.
like from really early, I was always about like just grinding it out. Cause like that was fun to me, doing something and going, shit, I can't really do this. And then figuring out a way to do it. Like that was the fun part. Even more so than the like end result of doing it was the like kind of cracking the code.
Right.
But yeah, it was Justin, my friend, that got me into it. It was like the fact that he could play, I was like, I have to do this.
Is Justin still playing?
A little bit. He's in school now getting his master's, and he's still like, him and Max are like my two best friends. I've known them forever, and he's in New Orleans now. He's in New Orleans going to the University of Chicago. Just a weird COVID situation.
Wow.
Where
Interesting.
but yeah, he plays a little bit, but not too much.
So what was the guy? Like, who was your guy? Like, was it like, I know when you say like Blink-182, a lot of my younger friends, they sort of discovered, because the punk rock, because I was, same way. I was like, I couldn't imagine playing Pink Floyd or, like even Led Zeppelin or the Beatles were very challenging. You had to know a lot of chords, but like when finding the Ramones and things like that, it was kind of like, oh, we can do this, and you're sort of learning as you're playing. Because, but was there a guy, a guitar player or a band, or I mean, you're kind of around your family, so I assume that has its own influence unto itself. But yeah,
no, for me, it's super interesting you say that, because like, I was always a Beatles freak. Like they were the first band that. Like my parents would always play stuff, but the Beatles are the first band that like I mean, this is not unique. There's a reason they're the Beatles, but like,
yeah, I know.
Like they were the first band I like really, really connected with.
Yeah. Me
like,
too.
whoa.
Me too.
Yeah,
It's a universal experience. Yeah.
But yeah, obviously I couldn't play that stuff when I was like 11. But I was really lucky that I got super, super into Green Day then. Like
Sure,
American
yeah.
Idiot came out right when I started playing guitar. And that was honestly probably the best record that could have come out then because most of the stuff is pretty simple on it.
Yeah.
But there is some stuff that's not. Like there's some
Yeah.
stuff on there that's a little trickier, but
Hmm.
the biggest thing is like it's all so melodically driven. So like it was a great way for me to, like you said, like kind of learn guitar as I learned these songs. Cause like,
Yeah.
each song, once I knew power chords, like I knew the bulk of every song. Once
Hmm.
I learned it, but then like you learn Holiday, and you're like, okay, now he's playing like minor, like he's actually
Right.
playing the third in there, and like that's part of the riff. And then you play
Hmm.
like Wake Me Up When September Ends. It's like, okay, you got some picking in there, and you
Yeah.
know, then so each song kind of threw another little tool in the box, and all the solos on there too. They're so cool because like they're really, really good. They're really, really simple. But they're
Yeah.
really smart. Like they're really.
Totally.
It's like Mike Campbell shit. Like
Oh,
like
100%.
again, it's all taste. It's like most people could play what Mike Campbell plays, but they're too scared to be that simple.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
and then he
He's
does it,
one of
and
my
everyone's like,
all-time
oh,
favorites. Yeah,
sorry.
he's one of my all-time favorites just for that very
Oh,
reason. Just plays the right thing. You know what I mean?
exactly. Like
Yeah.
he just like, and I've heard him like really, really play, and like
Oh yeah.
he can really, really
Yeah.
play. He just knows that he doesn't need to.
No.
But yeah, so Green Day really, really got me going on that stuff. Like they were such a great foundation, and I think Blink 182 I listened to a lot, and then I
Hmm.
didn't really listen to them as much when I was picking up the guitar because then I'd like moved on to Green Day. But both of them, I think, were a really, 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 really important foundational element for me because like they're both about the songs. Like they're really
Yeah.
simple, but those melodies are like they're so hooky, and they really figured out how to stretch really not much, whether it was chord wise or like vocal ranges. Like they're not working with that much,
Yeah.
but
It's
they
like a very.
really, but they managed to stretch it far where it's like they do. I think they do a really great job of bridging kind of like the attitude world and the songcraft world. And to me,
Totally.
that's like all my favorites do. But they managed to do it with even less. So starting out, that was really helpful.
Well, you bring up an interesting point because learning songs, and I played in cover bands when I was a kid. Um, Learning songs and playing cover songs and all that kind of stuff teaches you so much about songwriting as far as,
Mhm.
the intro and then the first verse, and then the pre-chorus into the chorus, and just sort of the layout of how songs work. Even to this
Yeah.
day, like I listen to, I sit down and try and teach myself Beatles songs on occasion. And I'm
Mhm.
always like, it's if you listen to the earlier Beatles stuff, they'll find a middle eight, then do like some kind of solo or a musical break, then go back to the middle eight. And I'm always like, wow, they like that middle eight so much they did it twice. It's like, and you're like, wow. So you're like constantly learning like new ways to do this crazy thing,
Mhm.
so like you say, and when you're learning something in the simple vein of American Idiot, there's still majors and minors and the interplay of how that melody works and all that kind of stuff, and songwriting in general. Because Billy Joe's really smart that way.
Oh, he's an amazing,
Yeah,
amazing writer. I think he's one of the best writers of the last, I was gonna say like 10 years, because to me it's like I guess like you always get trapped in that moment of like to me, I'm still like that age that American Idiot came out where it's
I
like Green
know.
Day was kind of a new band.
The
Um,
'90s to me feels like it's 10 years ago. So I'm constantly reminded that
that's
that's a long time ago.
yeah, well it's crazy where like I have so many friends whose little siblings were born like 2000. Like
Sure, yeah.
because they were like a couple years younger than us. But to me, they were always like, oh, they're the babies because they're like between like 2 and 3 years younger. And it's like, wait, you're like 21 now. What?
Well, it's like my cousin's kid one day. We were talking about something, back in 1980, whatever, and the kid goes, "That was back in the 1900s," and I'm like, oh, "Wow, that's a thing to that kid,"
Yeah. Well, the
Yeah.
funniest is one of the dudes I work with through this whole quarantine. I've kind of been locked in uh, with my dude Max, who like he's been my best friend since I was 12, and great, great guitar player and producer and writer. But we just started working together
Cool.
through this, and then this guy Christian London, who I got introduced to when I moved to LA, who's done like a bunch of really big pop stuff, and then I grew up listening to a ton of his songs and never knowing it was him. And then a friend introduced me, and like, thank God I didn't realize it was him when I met him because like I knew it was like, oh, he's like a big pop producer, and
He's
like we
like,
had a couple sessions, and then I like realized like started seeing his name on credits, I was like, I'm so happy I didn't know it when we first started working. I was like shitting myself. But like now he's like, he was like a production mentor and like writing mentor, now like just a partner on everything, and like great dude. But you know, he's he's really, really good at looking at all, kind of zooming out and looking at
Sure.
all this stuff and, grabbing bits of everything. But it's funny, we were so aligned on so much music, and Blink 182 is like one of the things he so does not get. He's Swedish.
Right.
Um,
I know. Yeah. Yeah.
and it's so funny to see melodic language. Like, I feel like, I feel like it is an age thing too, where like there are times where he's like 20, a little over 20 years older than me and Max, but like we vibe super well and we work on everything. And it's so funny, every once in a while he's like, remember when this came out? I was like, dude, that came out 5 years before I was born. Like I don't
Yeah.
remember. But it's funny to see what kind of bridges those gaps of like, he is very, very, very methodical when it comes to melodies, when it comes to song craft.
Interesting.
Where, like I think that's a very Swedish thing, where I think a lot of Americans are like, oh, we'll just like vibe.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if you can bridge those two, I think it's amazing. And I think that's why I love Billy Joe and like guys like that. So like they have the attitude, they have the vibe, they have those roots of just like, let's just jam. But like then they went home and really thought about it.
That's totally true. So is there a pressure? Like, it's really interesting to me because you've had this whole, like you grew up listening to a lot of the same things we all listen to, and then one of the things I think is really interesting, because you were in a band, the Dives were a cool band, and now you're doing your own thing. So what was the band experience like for you? Is that something that kind of inevitably pushed you to go, I just want to drive my own ship,
For
bring in
sure.
bring in your own people when you need to, and then because there's something to be said about, and I've done everything every different way to do this, because
Yeah.
the dynamic of being in a band, your father can attest to this, and I'm sure a million other people, is such a whole other balancing act compared to just like being able to write your own songs with people or without people, whatever you do, and just sort of go, you live and die by your own sword as opposed to everybody else's.
Totally. And so it's interesting. I grew up like always the guitar player. I was always playing guitar in different bands, and I knew I really wanted to write, but I was kind of like too scared to try it for a long time. And then it got time where I'm like, okay, I have to write something. But I was like, shit, like I don't really sing. So I had to figure that out too. So I was always playing guitar in bands, and finally it got to a point where it's like, I need to just do this. Like I got to start a band. I just got to do it or I'm not going to do it. And I knew
Right.
I wanted to do it, and I knew I could do it. So I did, but growing up in kind of a rock sphere, like I did, I think I'm usually pretty aware, like self-aware, and I get me, I get what I want, but like, if you've grown up in something, that certainly colors things, I think, past what you initially might recognize. And, that plus being a guitar player just seemed natural. Like, oh, I'll get another guitar player, bass player, drummer, and like we'll start a band. And that naturally becomes kind of, I think, rock oriented when you're playing in that setup, especially if the three other dudes are kind of into rock. Like,
Right.
and and it is a portion of who I am. Like I love that stuff, and I did grow up listening to it, and I still listen to it. But that's the thing, is it's a portion of who I am. And I started noticing, we'd be playing, and it was so much fun because like I love the dudes in the band, and like there's nothing better than playing live music. Like if you're vibing, it doesn't really matter what it is. It's just fun. But it was a weird experience to like be on stage, and we finally started getting a few more people to come to shows more consistently. And then we're opening for different people, and like we got to tour a little. I was like, this is sick. Why am I not happy? Like what's the disconnect? Because like on paper I should be stoked as fuck. Like
Yeah.
but I'm
100%.
not. And I realized, I'm like, okay, well, let's start with like, what am I listening to? And like everything I listened to in the van, like the closest thing was like Kings of Leon and the 1975. And like, cause those were the only two like bands that I
Right.
was really listening to at the time. But even there, like they're not just doing guitars, bass, and drums. There's a lot more going on there.
Of course. Yeah.
So that was something I noticed. I'm like, all right, like first off, the only bands I'm listening to are not approaching this from like a purist perspective of like, if they couldn't have done it on tape in 1965, we can't do it. It's like, no, no,
Right.
no. So, and then the bulk of what I was listening to had nothing to do with rock and nothing to do with bands. It was like, so that was kind of informative. It was like, shit, like all the stuff that's really getting me going and that I really love, it doesn't look or sound like what I'm doing. And in a lot of ways, I think that could be a good thing. Like you're bringing something new to what you do. But in this case, it was pretty obvious at that point, well, yeah, I'm not making what I really want to make. And I think, realizing that, I got off tour and I wrote a couple songs where I'm like, I'm just going to write the best songs I can. Like, because at that point I was always writing to fill a hole in the set. It was like,
Sure.
okay, which I think is valuable and it makes sense, especially when you're playing live. Like you gotta approach it more like a DJ of like what gets people going. And it's like, okay, if I notice that everyone's getting drinks during this song, we probably shouldn't play it again. Like,
Yeah.
So it was always writing to fill a hole in the set or to try and get a certain and very specific reaction. Then I was like, you know what? Like, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to write the best thing I can. I'm not going to worry about that. I'm not going to worry about, what the guys in the band think or how we're going to play it live, or what anyone else thinks. I think that was also interesting is like, when everyone has a very different and to them clear idea of what the band should be and none of them align with your own, it's like, I had a lot of the like kind of like rock guys around me going, oh, it's got to be heavier. It's got to be more. And I'm like, no, like it doesn't. Like I get it if it's trying to be this thing, but like
Right.
no, I don't want it to be that. And then the guys in the band are like, oh, but it's got to be more, like it's got to be more funky and like more light. I'm like, no, it definitely doesn't. Like, so it's like, okay, everyone seems to have a very different idea of what this like is supposed to be, like what we're shooting for, and none of them are what I think. So that's wrong to me.
Completely. Yeah.
So I wrote these songs, and I remember I called a friend who's a great producer in New York, and I was like, let's just demo these out. And and I mean this in the best way, she's like a laptop producer, like, like
Sure.
new,
Yeah.
not like, let's set up the mics perfectly. And it's just like, no, like just like plug in, we'll figure it out. And like,
Yeah.
that was the first time that I had done that sort of thing.
Interesting.
And it turned out super well. And I showed the band, and they did not fuck with it. And I get that too, because at that point
Yeah.
I wrote everything, but I always came in with songs like they were done songs, but the presentation was like, here's a shitty iPhone note, or like I'm gonna play it on an acoustic, and like we'll arrange it together, and like we'll kind of like together we'll make it complete, even though the song was done. But this was different. This was like, here's the song, here's the production, this is what the drums are doing. We have keyboards, we have 6 guitar parts, they're all done. I play bass. Like, I get it. I get why someone maybe wouldn't be super stoked on that.
Sure.
But I also couldn't ignore the fact that it was by far the best song that I had written to that point.
Sure.
And then the next one was better. So like that I thought was a really clear sign where it was like, when and like there had always been a part of me that like, even if it was 1%, it was a question of like, yeah, this is sick. I love it. Is it?
Right.
Like, and even if it was just like that 1 or 2%, it was there. And then with these songs, it was like, okay, maybe they're not the be all, end all, absolute best songs ever. Total smash, gonna buy me a house. But like, there wasn't a question. Like direction wise, it was like, yeah, this is obvious. Like for sure, absolutely no doubt, this is the direction. And that kind of informed it. It was just like, it felt right. And because up until that point too, that was the first band that I sang and wrote in. Like, I think it's easy to forget that like most guys in my position were like, they were writing songs since they were 12 or 13. Like I didn't start writing till I was like, I think I wrote one song when I was 16 or 17.
Right.
And then I wrote one more when I was like 18 or 19. But I didn't really start writing till I was like 20. So this was like a very new thing for me. Like I had listened to a shit ton of stuff, and I had dissected songs I loved to kind of like figure them out, but like actually making my own I hadn't done. So like this was all part of that learning process that I think a lot of people go through a little earlier. So it's easy to forget, and it was for me too. I'm like, shit, like, and it's not working. I'm like, yeah, dude, it's your first band. Like, it's the first band that like it's the first band that like you're fronting, that you're writing for. Like, yeah, that's fine. Like,
Well,
um,
that's the interesting thing about that because most of us can go and play in lousy bars and be terrible and out of tune and whatever and uh, there's a certain amount of like constantly being under a microscope in your position to some degree. I assume that no matter what you do, there's a lot of interest, and I mean there was a lot of love for the Dives, but at the same time, it's like the embryonic stages of anybody's writing career. George
oh,
Harrison, by comparison to Lennon and McCartney, was a late bloomer, but man, did he ever crank out some great stuff.
oh, dude,
Yeah,
his stuff by the end was just like,
he
but
was pretty much the top dog in a lot of ways. Yeah.
yeah, no, but that's yeah, it's interesting you say that because like I grew up, I did do that. I played in so many shitty little clubs, out of tune, playing a different song than the bass player at the same time,
Yeah.
like
I still do
around
that now. I still do
yeah,
that now.
exactly
Yeah, yeah.
around LA, and I did do that, and that was great. But yeah, it was a different thing when it was like, oh, it's like my band now. Where like, it wasn't like a billion eyes or anything, but definitely like, people started looking a little more closely. And I
Right.
think that too was something that I noticed is I had to get out in front of quickly as everyone's like, or not everybody, but a lot of people had ideas of what it should be, or where it should go based on my dad. And it's
Yeah.
like, I don't really have any interest in that. And
Right.
it was just something that I realized, wait, like I can't let that inform this. So I quit and moved here and started doing my thing. Like,
Well, it would be weird, it's funny because watching Wolfgang Van Halen do his thing. There's a certain amount of pressure or expectation that suddenly he's supposed to be doing like, Van Halen Mark, the next generation or something like that, or you're supposed to be doing, you know, a new version of your father's music. It's like that'd be it would almost be. I mean, it would be, I'm sure you would find your own twist and do your own thing on it, but to me, it's kind of like, you know, us grown-ups trying to make sense of what young people are into is always embarrassing in so many ways. It's like, well, I don't know, man. Like there's hip hop and pop and country music and all these other things that are so much more, and not more, but they really compete in every possible way
mhm.
for attention, for taste, for everything. So it would be up to you to decide the music you want to make. And I think it's
Yeah,
really cool that you found your own thing. And I mean, your voice is stellar. And I'm like, well, you're more
thanks,
than
man.
qualified to say, to sing hard rock if you wanted to do that. But I think it's important, and I think it's important for anybody really, to just forge their own way. And I think that
Mhm.
it's really exciting that you've done that.
Well, thanks, man. Now it's like, I spent the last year, or actually now two because of quarantine,
Yeah, yeah,
locked
exactly.
away, just like shredding my shit. And like now I've finally gotten to a point really in the last few months where it's like, all right, I have a much clearer picture, not only of what I don't want to do, but exactly what I do want to do.
That's important.
And there's so much stuff in the bag now that like now I'm just getting ready to release it all that I'm so amped on that, I think, it's great and I'm so about it. And I always test stuff against the shit that I love and the stuff that I'm listening to now. It's like, um, I've said it so many times, but it's like, it's true. When I finish something or when I think something's done, I drop it in a playlist with a ton of stuff I love and I'm listening to at the moment and just hit shuffle. And if it doesn't get me going as quickly and as much as everything else when it comes on, it's like, then I got to go back to the drawing board. So I'm like, I'm so confident in the stuff now and I love it. And I think that's important because like you said, like, so many people are you going to put the makeup on? And it's like, no, I'm like, truthfully, like, you don't want me to either because, like, it would be a worse version of Kiss and a worse version of me. Like, that's just like a lose lose. And I don't mean it in a bad way. Like, I love Kiss and I am so grateful for everything that's kind of sprung out of that.
Of course, yeah.
Me just on like I mean I've had an amazing life and that's a large reason why. And like I even like I finally listened to Kiss as a listener when I was like maybe 16 or 17. I put on a live and I was like, I should like try and hear this as a listener. I was like,
Man,
shit, this is really cool.
I would love to be a fly on that wall just to hear your objective experience listening to what, because that was my first Kiss record too, was the
Yeah.
Alive record. I mean, the fact that the audience is in there and all that kind of stuff, it's such a an overpowering experience. But
Oh yeah.
it's
So it's so cool and it's so weird to kind of step back because I'd heard those songs a million times, but they almost didn't register as songs because it was just dad's work. So it's like, yeah, they're things. And then I heard them, like really heard them. It's like, holy shit, this is great.
Yeah.
It's so cool. But it's it's not me, and it's like there are other people out there who can do it way more justice than me, for sure. Because like that's like that is their core. Like there are people who could continue Kiss, and whether it's you know just carrying the legacy on or taking it a little further in their own way. There are people who can do that and who could do it way better than me, but I'm not that
Right.
guy because like you're gonna get a worse version of that and a much worse version of me. So it's like let's just leave them separate. Like it's like you said, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Like it's all
Yeah.
it's all back to that. It's like it would just be not great for either.
Well, and like I said, it's important for you to do you.
Yeah.
It's just I mean, it's a funny thing because whether your father's running a dry cleaner business or whatever, it's kind of like the expectation that you're part of the family business, which in sense you are part of the family business in that you make music, but it has to be your music. It has to be what you feel. I mean, that's the thing about art. If I may throw that word around without you know having it bite me on the ass, is it's one of those things where you really when you can't really sell something you don't believe in, you know what I mean? And I think that's if you believe what you're doing, everybody's going to believe you, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing. I think it's funny. Like, I love Kanye. I think he's
Sure.
absolutely amazing. Just like, dude's nuts, but he's a genius. And I
Yeah, yeah.
remember, I forget what interview it was, but someone was asking him, like, he's like, "You're very full of yourself, and you say all this shit." And he's like, "No." He's like, "If I don't believe in me, how can I expect anyone else to believe in me?"
Of
He's like,
course, yeah.
like you might think I'm arrogant, and that's okay, but like, if I don't think I'm the absolute best and love my shit, like, why should you? And he said that in his own Kanye way, but like that's what he said, and it was like, wait a second, yeah. And I remember that was a long time ago. Like that was before I really listened to Kanye. Like I knew Kanye and I knew some of his stuff. I'm like, yeah, this is cool. But like I always thought he was like that dude's kind of a dick. And like then I heard him say it and I was like, wait, yeah, like of course that makes total sense. And like that's kind of what set me down this path of like binging Kanye, going like, oh my god, this is like absolutely amazing. And like, yeah, he's still nuts, but like that's totally true. Like if you don't really, really love your stuff, how can you expect anyone else to?
Yeah, it's a weird balancing act because a lot of artists, oh, we're using big words today. Um, we sort of have a balancing act where it's that Kanye side. We're not sure if when Kanye goes home, he's really hard on himself. I don't know. Maybe he's like,
Yeah,
you're nothing, but that's a part of artistic personalities too, is that sort of like, being really hard on yourself and this
oh, for
isn't good
sure.
enough and that kind of stuff. So
I
I
think
think
we
you have,
all have that, the sleepless nights of like, but is it good?
yeah, and you have to find that balance between like, you believe in yourself and you have to kind of give yourself a certain amount of like, look, it's not going to be it's not going to be a number one every time, but the fact that you're making it and that you're just like you said, you wrote a song and it's the best song you ever wrote, and the next one was even better. So you're trying to like outdo yourself, get better, get stronger, and
Yeah,
that's really all you can do is grow. That's the important thing.
that's it. And like, and you do have to have that ability to get a little distance and be hard on yourself. And I know too, from a few friends who have worked with Kanye, dude works at his craft. Like,
I'm sure.
and he's one of those guys. Like sometimes you'll see on songs, like there are plenty where he is the only writer and producer, which is fucking awesome.
Yeah,
Or like he's writer producer, and someone that he got the sample from has writing credit. But like
sure.
there are other ones where it's like they're fucking 15 writers. But it's also because I know like there are times he'll have multiple rooms set up or
Hmm.
multiple people around, all of them challenging whether it's one line or a beat or whatever, because he wants
Right.
it to be the best it can be. And it's like, that's really cool. And I think that says a lot where, yeah, maybe you're egotistical in some ways, but like if you were that egotistical, you wouldn't let 15 people challenge your work just to make it better, Like,
there's a certain amount of WWF in there, or WWE in there too. I think there's a certain amount of like, that's who he is. And it's not like he's the first guy to come along and say he's the greatest.
Yeah.
Muhammad Ali said it, and a million musicians before him. So it's part of the deal. It's part of the thing to be like, get up there and go, stand up and just beat your chest,
Yeah.
So how does that work for you? Like, I was watching the videos earlier, and I've been watching them off and on when you were releasing them. But I sat down today and I thought, you know what? Evan's a really good actor. I was watching them with my wife, and I go, because it's a whole other thing, when we all make music videos and we just stand there lip syncing, and your guitar's not plugged in. It doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want. But when they sort of throw things at people, it's kind of mildly. I did some acting when I was younger because I had filmmaker friends who were, hey, we need a guy with tattoos and long hair. That's the guy. But it was never natural to me. You know what I mean? But watching you, I thought, I think Evan could make a career out of this. It's like, I don't know if that's something you've ever thought about, or if I'm just kind of like, you should derail your entire career, all the hard work you've done that, and just go off and, and be, I don't know, you could be an Avenger or something.
Soap opera.
A soap opera.
No, I appreciate it. For me, I haven't thought of it as acting at all. For me, I just wanted to make cool shit where like, I really hate music videos that are just a couple random scenes that you then toggle back and forth. Yeah. Like, I think that no matter how cool the scenes are, and like, I've seen it, it's definitely common on a lower budget. Like, I'm working with a very, very low budget here to pull this off, and doing so much of it just total DIY. But, so I get it. But I've seen it on super high budgets too. No matter how glossy or how cool it is, like, if it's just a couple scenes that randomly, it's like, that's boring to me. I don't like it. Like, I've never liked it. And so for me, it always starts like, I'm working on the next video now, and it always starts with an idea. Like, there has to be a reason, like, why? What is the thing? Even if it's super simple, like, what's the thing beyond just like you ran out of gas, that kind of thing. Like, that's a really, really simple idea. It's like,
but really effective. You know what I mean? Like, to have a theme to it. Yeah.
And it can be the simplest thing. It's like a song too. Like, I want to hold your hand. Pretty simple, but pretty clear. Like, there's 100%. An idea there. We know what you want to do. Like, so it starts with an idea, and I just wanted to do something with the memories videos. Like, I wanted to do something that wasn't just a normal cover video. Like, I wanted to, right. And I kind of got close to running out of gas, and I had this crazy idea, and it was like, can we pull it off? And it worked. Like, that was also crazy because I was able to email Brian. I've known him through, or I guess both my parents, but through my mom for a long time, like, kind of peripherally. I was like, do you think? And I didn't really think. Like, he is the sweetest dude. He used to come out to shows in New York sometimes. Like, really just amazing, on top of being an insane actor, just a great guy, and really, really supportive of art. Like, really awesome dude. I didn't think he would do it. But, I had to ask, and I said, I'm like, hey, like, no biggie. I don't want to make you uncomfortable. Like, all you have to say is no. But, like, I've been working on all this stuff. I sent him a bunch of music. I'm like, I had this crazy idea. And I was kind of expecting, best case scenario, maybe he hits me back and wants to get on the phone and kind of suss out a little bit more how it's going to go down, what the specifics are, everything. But no, he's just like, yeah, sounds great. I'd love to be in it. And it was like,
that's so funny. So do you have to have a trailer for Bryan Cranston, and like he was
the absolute chillest. We didn't have a budget for a trailer, so
I know,
but that also said, it was like, okay, shit, like, we got the green light. Now I actually have to do it. Now I have to pull this off. And I've never worked on videos before, so like, to me it's like, oh, you want the camera to go up and then in? Great, just move the camera. It's like, no, that's not that simple. You have to have a counterweight system where apparently a steady cam is different. So a steady cam can go like this or this, but you can't go. No, so it's like, okay, so then what do we do for that? We need a trinity for that. There are only a few guys who can operate that well. So like, it was like, I learned a lot on the fly. Sure. And then that played into the second one, where the second one is like, all right, we have half the budget of the first, and the first we didn't have much of a budget, and we have to do a video that's twice as long. How the fuck do we do that? Um, and that was just a lot of spitballing. And it was really me and Christian in the studio between working on tracks. Like, I'd be like, hey, what if, well, the song's El Camino, so it's got to have an El Camino, but it's gonna be boring to just drive an El Camino. Um, what are we gonna do? And then we were mocking up the shots. It was like, wait a second, what if half of it's a video game? Like,
Yeah,
it was like, so we just kind of kept going back and forth, and it was like, okay, we want to get this sort of emotion here. Let's push in. And it was just a lot of, I kind of think of it the same way I thought of learning guitar. It's just problem solving of like,
yeah.
I want to do this. I have no idea how to do this, but I want to do that. So I'm going to do it. Now let's figure out the how. Um, so
So you have a future as a film director now too, if you want, or video director. It's like it's not that far off. Anything's possible.
anything's possible, but for me, it's just like everything I do to try and get more artistic control and expression. Where it's like I don't look at it like you know anything more than that. Whether it's
Sure.
and the next video is going to be nothing like those two, where those are they're very bright and sunny and fun, which I think is great, and I'm super about. But the next one is really not that. So
Interesting.
that's another challenge where it's like, okay, I know how to do that, and I know how to make another one of those videos, but this one really can't be that. And I'm in the middle of that now, where it's like it's just another challenge, and I think it's so fun because to me it's just an extension of the song. I don't even look at it like a video or acting or anything. No, it's just more. It's the visual side of the song. So how do you do it?
Well, it has elements to me like of Donald Glover's ability within Childish Gambino, because they
That
aren't just videos. He's like, I mean, he's amazing in his own way,
he
but
talk about genius. Like
yeah,
that guy
he's
is
so great.
just
Yeah.
so next level.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Atlanta's amazing. Like I can't sing his praises enough, and his music is nuts. Like I was like, anytime you hear like an actor has some music, you're like, okay, well, let's give it a shot. Press play
Yeah.
and go. Well, good for him. But with him, it's like what But I think that you know it definitely brings out the abilities of like you say, taking control of your career is so important. I'm sure you've had this conversation not just with your father, but almost anybody, because you want to be able to kind of build upon it, as opposed to,
Yeah.
which actually brings up an interesting thing to me, because I don't want to keep you much longer because I'll just go, but because of the way things are in the industry in these days, and I understand COVID is sort of dictating a whole other thing, but it's been interesting watching as I'm getting ready to work on a new record again,
Yeah.
which the conversation of like a collection of 10 to 12 songs with a cover, and
Mhm.
here's this thing, but watching you and a lot of other younger artists going like, here's a song with a music video, and
Mhm.
then and just sort of releasing music. It almost kind of it takes us back to 1950 whatever. Here's Hound Dog, with the flip
Yeah.
side of this. Um, but is that where you? I mean, I'm asking as a veteran to
Yeah.
the next to the new guard, going like, is that what you foresee, or is that something you've kind of like? Are you following any model in this, or is it just kind of like going with your heart as to what you want to do?
Definitely, I think there's definitely a model to follow, and like that's where people are like, but it's all about the art. I'm like, yeah, but you also want people to hear it.
Of course, yeah,
I think it's totally cyclical. Like you look at the 50s and 60s, and it was all singles, and then it became all albums where like Zeppelin didn't even release singles,
no,
and then you got MTV, and it was back to singles, but you still had albums, but it was singles,
hmm
and then you're in the 90s, and it's all albums, and then it's like
hmm
I think it's just cycles. And right now, especially for less established artists, like, I think we're actually in a really cool place because I think people do value way more than even like 3, 4 years ago, really value albums again. Where it's like
sure,
when you're invested in an artist, like people are waiting and just dying until an album drops. But like you got to get to that point, and to get there, I think is different. Where before it used to be like release an EP, another EP, then your first record,
right,
then if you're lucky, the second it breaks you. But really, it's like the third record, and
yeah,
now it's like you have Lauv, who like dude was playing arenas and didn't even release a record, like an album, until this last year, and he's been
wow,
big for a few years. Um, just because, but he released a ton of music and like mixtapes, EPs, tons of singles. I think it's more just like you want to get people invested in your world.
Yeah.
So you just keep, and now, even as a listener, like for a new artist, like I'm not ready when I first discover a new artist, usually for an album. I want a couple songs, a couple videos, then a little more and a little more. And like, you want to be invited in.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think consistency, like, it's one thing if you discover someone who's been around a long time and you can like go down the rabbit hole of years of work. But if you don't have that real bulk, like I'd rather be along the journey with someone where every month it's like, oh shit, he just put out something new. I got to see where he's going. Like I want to feel a part of that. And I think that's really what it is especially with social media and the way everything's connected now, you're really just trying to show people the process and the journey, because I think a lot of people value that. Like people want to be part of it. They want to be part of your thing, your world.
Absolutely. It reminds me a lot of the punk rock days where, it all seems so inclusive in its own way. So I think that the ability of releasing a single and being able to build upon that into the next single and the next thing and sort of going from there. It's been really interesting watching, this new wave of things happening and yourself being a big part of that. It's been really, oh, okay, so here's a song, here's a song, here's a song, as opposed to, like I said, here's 12 things you have to sort of invest an hour of your time into, when we live in a day and age where that's not,
but that's also still amazing. Like
yeah,
once you're in it, like there's nothing I love more than an album, like a proper
sure. Of
record.
course.
When like someone I love puts out an actual album, like I guess at this point, I think it was 2018, Troye Sivan put out Bloom. And like that was amazing. Like to have that collection of like, all right, I'm not just listening to a song or two. I can sit down and like be in this moment for more than just a moment. Like that's
exactly.
really, like I love that. And I think, thankfully, I think people really do value that now. You just have to get to that point.
Totally. So what is the future looking like for you? I mean, as far as releases go, I mean, is there like a end goal? Well, not an end goal really, but is there somewhere you want to see this go? Did 2020 take a lot of wind out of your sails, or has it kind of helped you to kind of continue to keep doing your thing?
2020, 2020 did a lot of things, but
yeah, I know.
I was supposed to launch stuff about a year ago, right before this. So in a lot of ways, it was really frustrating, and I hate the fact that we can't be playing live now.
I know.
Even small shows, like I would kill to just be playing like around LA, like just to play school night, and then go out after with friends. Like but it definitely I think was a net positive for me, because I've just been locked in. Sorry, I gotta let my girlfriend in. She's buzzing my front door. I would do anything for that, but in a lot of ways I've gotten to spend the last year, I'm like super lucky. I've just been able to work on this stuff, and I've been locked in just working. So I think I've gotten a lot of the best songs out of this. Like the last 4 months or so, I've written some really, really great shit that like I cannot wait to get out there. And I think if we didn't have this period, I would have kind of been in go mode. So I don't know what the stuff would have been like. I think I would have been kind of stuck a little more where I was a year ago, which was great. And like I still have a lot of that stuff that will be coming out, but I'm really happy to add that extra bit of time.
Well, that's exciting, and it's infectious. The fact that you're so excited about your music. Is there going to be a band? Like you're going to have to like, how does that work? Is it going to be like a drummer and a bass player and the
for live? For sure. I mean, there's nothing better than like a band for live stuff. But definitely, the final say thing I think is important. Like now with Max and Christian, like, and everyone I work with, but especially through quarantine, it's been really them for the most part. Like I love working together because there's no ego. There's nothing other than let's make the best song.
Perfect.
And if we're working on something for someone else, what that is different than when we're working on it for me. Because like, there's like objective great melody writing, let's say, but like what's best for me is not necessarily what's best for someone else. So when it comes to me, it's like we work on the songs like let's make this the best for me possible, and we're all working for that same goal. But then the thing that I love about it is like we'll try anything, we'll do anything, and then at the end of the day, if I say like we tried it. I really I want to like it. I get it on paper. It just doesn't work. I don't vibe with it. Then it's like, great. Then it's not that. And like, that's so nice where with the band, it's like, you got to argue, you got to have the whole thing. Then if it's, you have three against one, but it's like, but then I wrote the song, so like, I think
Yeah,
that's got to count for something. And then, like it gets too messy as opposed to just let's try absolutely everything and what's best will win. And
exactly. Yeah.
and if something's great but it doesn't work for me, also great. Like there's stuff like there's a song a while ago we wrote that like it's a great song and I really love it. It's so wrong for me, and that's fine. So it's like we sent it out, and like
Right.
you find it a home with someone it would fit better for. But then there's stuff for me where like it's like yeah, this is great, but like this pre is just not the sauce for me. Like I know you love it. I get why you love it. Let's use it on a different song, but like not this one. And
Interesting.
having that ability, I think, is amazing and really important for me.
That's amazing. I'm really excited to see where you go. I'm really enjoying everything that comes out. And like I say, I think it's important, the expectation of people who are expecting to press play and go, well, what is this? I think that's important that you do that. I think that it should be you, and I think that
That's,
you've really found that thing, and I'm excited to watch it bloom. See what I did there?
yeah, I can't wait to show you the rest. And when we get off, I'll send you a private stream of a bunch of
Oh,
shit. You
please
gotta hear
do.
it out.
Please
Yeah.
do.
And
I won't share it. Just kidding.
kept on Twitter.
Yeah, yeah,
And dude,
exactly.
I'm stoked for to hear the new record you're working on. That's
Yeah,
gonna be pretty cool.
it's such a weird time making records during all this. I mean, because this is different. This is rock bands going into,
Yeah. Studio.
it's locked down and it's weird, and some people are more paranoid than other people, and it's just kind of like
We were
we're gonna
talking
do
like
our best.
I've been very like locked in.
I know, me too.
So yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's a weird time, but one thing that, like you just pointed out, is that it's just such a great time for creativity, and for me, it's like it really had to light a fire under every other side of my home
mhm.
recording, writing, all that kind of stuff became well, basically the only thing you could do. So
Yeah.
that's what we're doing, and it means that 2021 and 2022 is just going to be like an influx of new music and a bunch
Totally.
of bands dying to go on the road. So it's going to be all
I think
good.
it's gonna once it all lifts, I think it's gonna be amazing. It's just gonna be
It is.
rough until that.
It's going to be the roaring 20s, as they say.
Well, yeah, dude. Like you had World War One, then the Spanish flu. I think we're fixing
Exactly.
for something sick,
I
but
think
it's
so. I think
gonna be a
so.
minute.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for hanging out, man. And I look
Dude,
forward
thanks for
to,
talking.
well, we'll grab some coffee up there in California one of these days.
Yeah, as soon as we can. I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome, Daddy-O. Take care. Big
Take it easy,
love.
man.
Bye bye.
Bye.